Hey everybody, thanks for joining me for another one-man review. Today I'll be taking a look at Deb JJ Lee's new book, In Limbo. This is out from First Second. Brand new book, just got it in the mail and read through it. Really enjoyed it. It's the type of book that I'm always cautious about. It's a coming of age, I have mental health problems memoir, which is always like, I'm a little scared about this. But the art I saw just looked really, really amazing, and so I had to get it and give it a try. And I really wound up liking it. It is exactly within that genre, which I think is played out and tired a little bit. But the writing in this one is really well done, and it's combined with really, really gorgeous art, as you can see right here in this opening sequence. And art that oftentimes is like technically confusing to me in a way that's compelling. Like I'm not quite sure how it was accomplished or what I'm looking at, and that's really exciting. And then the autobiographical writing is handled in a way that shows a lot of the things that I find problematic within this genre. That I think that this type of thing it's cathartic for the artist, but if this is all they do, it will keep them stuck in unhealthy cycles. But at the same time, it's handled in a really thoughtful way that I'm not used to seeing in most of these, where I think the artist is doing a lot of healthy self-reflection about their contributions to the situations, and I haven't seen that a lot in these memoirs of like the outcast searching for their way in society. It just seems to be, always about the society. And I think this book is very balanced between the kind of societal pressures that are on a person coming from all sides, but also the pressures that a person puts on themselves. And that seems like something, not I've never read a book like that before, but it seems like a new wrinkle in the autobio genre for me that is refreshing and nice. I'll talk about that more as we go. But here you'll get a look at just some of the stunning artwork in the book, and you'll see what I'm talking about the confusion I have about how it's made, because there's this really clean line work, and then there's stuff like this that very obviously looks like kind of pencil drawn. I'm sure it's probably done with digital tools, but it's fairly realistic, kind of chalky, pencily look to it. And then you have other stuff like this that almost just looks like manipulated photographs, but then those elements oftentimes will have some drawn looking elements, abstractions in them. So I think there's some interplay between photography and digital drawing, and maybe some actual drawing with pen and ink, I'm not sure. But this is a good example here as well of like the makeup kit, where it looks photographic at first glance, but then you see a lot of the objects and there's just a little bit of simplification or a little bit of distortion, and it makes for a really interesting combination and a lot of really great atmospheric moments. And then having everything printed in the one spot color is really nice as well. Given that it was printed in a spot color, it's a bit of a bummer that it's printed in halftones throughout, especially because of the digital production. They could have done the line work as just the straight bitmap output like Sean does, and had that be crisp, and then had all of this be in the halftones or the diffusion dither, and the line work and the lettering could have been cleaner. But for the most part, you get a softness throughout the book that works really well. With the line work, I really like the influence. I don't know this, I'm not familiar enough with this genre of manga, but there's a certain type of line work that I see, especially in the manga for young girls, that shows up in here, where it's like a clean line and then this kind of obsessively clean filling back in of the blacks, and that shows up here. But with all of these other stylistic things going on top of it, it feels really, really fresh and really new. So that's kind of a general overview of like the content of my response to the book. Probably something I should have said at the end, but that's like going into the book. And then I just want to show some instances that kind of elaborate on those things. So the book is autobiographical of Deborah growing up as someone whose family immigrated to the United States from Korea when she was very young, and it seems like spent some time in Canada as well. So she's feeling displaced. She feels out of place as an Asian in a school where there's not many Asians. But she also feels displaced from her Korean family and her Asian heritage, and is going into that. And then is just also displaced, and this is one of the things I like about it is just talking about other kind of displacements that happen too, where it's like you're just an awkward, geeky kid, and it wouldn't matter if you were Korean or not. You would still have a lot of these same problems, and that's acknowledged as well. And so it's kind of just taking a look at all of those things that could leave someone as an outcast. This scene here had me a little bit worried right out the front because it immediately jumps into like the fact that you feel like an outcast because of your ethnicity, and I thought, this whole book's going to be about that, but it's not, and it's actually handled in a really interesting way. So this is a scene here where she's sitting there, and the teacher, she's going to high school, so this whole book is the 4 years in high school leading up to getting into college and finding her identity as an artist and stuff. So at first it's showing the teacher having a problem pronouncing her name, and then giving the teacher a correction, and then just telling the teacher that she can just go ahead and call me Deborah or Deb if you want. And the teacher's like, sorry, I just didn't know. And she's like, it's fine. And that scene, I'm sure it's like very uncomfortable for her, but I like that she kind of gives the teacher a pass too, because I've been on the other side of this every semester I've ever taught, where there's no reasonable way that you can expect a teacher to know how to pronounce properly people's names in every possible language on earth. But that doesn't take away, so she's kind of giving him a pass. Like, and I can tell you from the other side, it's awkward. You don't want to fuck up a person's name. And I've been in situations where I've mispronounced the name, and actually the students in the class, the kid's name was Hermogenes, and it spelled like the Greek philosopher Hermogenes, and I thought, oh, finally I know how to pronounce a name. And then I got ruthlessly ridiculed by the students in the class. It's Hermo. Like, what? Hermogenes. It's, oh, okay, I'm sorry. So I like that on the page turn, she kind of set me up for, especially as a teacher, I was like, God damn it, like have some pity the other way. And then she shows that, and that's nice. But then it also goes on to show, like, pretty immediately that the kids have picked up on it, and that honest mistake from the teacher has led to bullying from the students. So like here you have this kid saying, does Yunjing mean Deborah in Chinese? And she's Korean, so that's obviously an irritation. She tells him I'm Korean, but then she's thinking, like, does Bailey Franklin mean barely finished 8th grade in Caucasian? So it's showing the complexity of those situations, which I really like. I feel like a lot of graphic memoirs in this genre tend to be like problematizing everybody else but not having empathy back. And so that empathy and showing how it's not really a problem of the teacher, but it accidentally leads to other problems, I think is really well handled and thoughtful. So that makes me really, really enjoy the writing in this book. I think it's very careful, thoughtful writing. Here's another page just where some of the images, like, I don't know if this is photographic or not. It looks, on at first glance, it looks like a photograph. The same with the violin and stuff. It looks very photographic. But then at closer inspection, a lot of it looks, more drawn. It looks more abstract, like the cars are just simple marks. And I really enjoy that style. I really enjoy the mixture with the line work. And then here Deb is playing the violin, which is, like, it seemed, as someone who grew up, like, my two best friends were Asian, like, they both parents made him play a musical instrument. My friend Mark played violin, so that just seems very familiar to me. Very on stereotype, but obviously was true for her. And then I like the little musical nature of the kind of shrinking rhythm here. She's like not too interested in playing her violin, really. She's also got kind of the stereotypical Asian family dynamic, that the mom is really, really overbearing, especially about grades and all of this stuff, and really, really up her ass in a mean way, like spying on her. I watched you playing, and you stopped and were drawing every now and then. And, I watched that dynamic with both of my friends. And then also on the other side of that dynamic, which I watched as well, is the kind of more loose, caring dad. And that there's a lot of that in this book. It seems like the majority of her problems stem from dealing with her mother, and her mother being really supportive and caring, and like, I want to be a good mom, but then that going like way too far. And they even use the term tiger mom at some point in the book, kind of like dismissively, but that term does refer to this stereotype, and it is playing out in her life, and it was obviously very damaging to her. I really like this. This is her, obviously, her sketchbook. She's showing this to her music teacher. And so I'm hoping that these are actually scans of the type of stuff that she was doing in high school. I think that would be really cool to include that. And this is where she starts to realize that she's an artist. Just some more really awesome effect rendering throughout the book. Here, getting contact lenses, and I've never had contact lenses, but the distortions and the warps here just seem like that's got to be exactly what it looks like, and just the way again that's handled with all of this soft diffused rendering versus the line work, I think is really beautiful art all the way throughout. Here's just some more instances of bullying, and here she's also complicating the kind of ethnic thing that it's not just that she's getting bullied when she shows up in a school where she's like, you know, one of the few Asian kids. It's that when she's going to the Korean school as well, like the kids are really mean to her. So it's showing that it's more of just, you know, some people wind up being outcasts for whatever reason, and is delving into that. Some really good renderings here, I think, of having like social anxiety, a panic attack, a dissociative disorder, where she's just like checking out from the room, and those are familiar feelings to me as well. So that's very well rendered and well represented in the comic, very smartly. And then I also really like the abstraction here of going to see a therapist, and the therapist is always, I'm sure in real life the therapist wasn't literally hiding behind these leaves, but it probably must have felt like that. And so I think that looks really good. And then just the abstraction of the shapes and the negative spaces and all that stuff is really well handled. And that kind of imagery is really interesting to me now. Really like that. And then she also mentions that they lived in Alabama for 3 years. And now that I do live in Alabama, I know I've seen it. Like that's very hard for people in the Asian community here, because there are not many Asians at all. Growing up in California, it was, you know, there was a significant Asian population, especially in Sacramento, Central Valley area, San Francisco, where I grew up. This heavy Asian population. But here, like my colleague, when I started here, was a Chinese woman, and she would almost go out of her way in an awkward way. When an Asian student came up, they were immediately like, "Oh, there's another Asian here. I'm so happy to have an Asian." And you know, so I've seen firsthand like kind of that here in Alabama as well. So I can only imagine how that moving around, especially when you're feeling displaced, and then coming to Alabama was difficult. And she also talks about when they moved to New Jersey, the students in New Jersey were ahead in academics compared to where she was at the same grade level in Alabama, and that's very true. That would be very difficult. Some really nice abstractions, just happened to flip to that, but some abstractions that show emotion. And then I really like this bit. She's talking to her therapist, and it says, but by running, going to the city, being with other people, you're expanding your world further, a running space, a new space. And she's by running, not by running to the city, but she's running, she's going to the city, she's being with other people. So she's creating new spaces for herself, and soon a college space. And this is like having more worlds, circles, like these means that you have pillars of support. So you have more if one of them falls. And I really like that like the more diversified the worlds that you move within, the less important any one world becomes. And I think that's a really smart lesson that she learned and obviously latched onto and is passing on. So there's a lot of wisdom in this book, especially for a young artist, I think. Here there's a note where she's talking about, well, there's other mental issues I've struggled with, blah, blah, blah. That's a story for another day. As much as I enjoyed this book, I still, like, my immediate reaction was like, please no. You're a very, very talented artist and a very, very talented writer. And I mean, personally, I would like, you know, I feel like people need to get these books out of them sometimes, but I fear for creators who get trapped in, and you know, this is my own bias, but this is my worry about these kind of works, is I've read plenty of creators who get trapped in autobiography, and you can watch them drive themselves crazy. And especially if they're already coping with mental health issues and the work becomes the way to cope, it's like getting rid of the pillars and you just narrow down to only focusing on the mental health. And as much empathy as there is in this book and tender writing, I think that it would be, the work itself would benefit from an outward look and empathy at someone else. And I feel like our society kind of pushes people to, like, you're only allowed to tell your own story, and that could be a problematic. This is obviously a over 300-page book, so a creator who's really capable of intense work and great things. And to see someone like that, like, just always kind of be telling the next story about their mental health is a bit sad to me. Throughout the whole book, there's this subplot of the societal pressure in Korea for plastic surgery, which is something that I got exposed to in grad school. We had a number of Korean students, and a lot of the female students were talking about the pressures of their artwork was about the pressures of the plastic surgery industry over there, and especially the eyelids, that getting the surgery to actually have a double lid and over the eye. And so she winds up going and doing that, and I like this little diagram here of how it happens, and it's like, ugh, it's so gross. I mean, just kind of accept who you are. And she has a friend telling her that throughout the book, but she kind of doesn't take it. And then here she's been given a camera and going around taking pictures. And again, this is one of those things where at first glance you think, like, well, this is just pictures of stuff, she's just taken the pictures and put a grain tone over them and then put them in the book. But some of them, like this, look more like that, and other ones like this and this, like upon closer inspection, look more drawn to me, or there's like abstraction in these things. Maybe there was filters run on them, I don't know. But it leads to a really interesting look, and the fact that I don't know that it's right on this boundary between things is really, really interesting to me. So there's just that kind of visual appeal throughout the book that really grabs me. And like I said, these kind of abstract moments. There's some montages I didn't even put because there's a lot in this book that I haven't covered that I highly recommend going and getting it for yourself and seeing it. But a lot of atmospheric and emotional effects that are rendered throughout the book with this technique that make it very mysterious in an amazing way. So I do think it's a really, really potent work. It seems like by the end of the work, the author has come to some kind of terms with herself, but then there's an afterword where it's like, I still deal with mental health issues, and like, yeah, of course they never go away, and that's where I just worry a bit about like the career trajectory of people like this who have been kind of raised in the moment of autobiography in comics, and especially the idea that you're not really allowed to tell other people's stories, that there's something wrong with that you can only tell your own. It just doesn't seem healthy. And it seems to, and this is one of the problems I have with this genre in general, this is really well rendered stuff too, it seems to keep people locked, and this is the main problem I have with the autobiography genre in general, and a societal problem in general, is it seems to keep people obsessed with identity. Who are they? This whole book, like that outsider feeling, comes from not knowing who you are, not knowing where you fit in, not knowing which of those pillars you belong to, which world you belong to. And I just see this over and over in my own students. I see it over and over in comics, and I don't know what's going on in society that has trapped everyone so heavily in this worldview. And that's why I have a tendency to, like, be skeptical about even reading books like this, because it's just putting me back into something that I find uncomfortable about the way our world is working right now. But there's plenty of works like this that are really powerful, well done works of people grappling with the problem, and I think that's important as well. I just hope that through these works, like this work to me seems like there's an outward turning to the problems of others as well. It's not all internally focused on the author's own kind of problems, even though that's the majority of it. And so I'm hoping that as people get more sophisticated with these types of works, that that problem will kind of start to go away, and that we'll get back to outward turned empathy, and being able to tell stories about people whose lives you haven't lived, that it's not all has to be your experience only. So within my skepticism for the genre and the problems that I have with the genre and specifically the subset of the genre that's like, here's my coming of age mental health outsider, for whatever reason I don't fit the norm kind of story. This is one of the more exceptionally well done ones, and one of the ones that makes me more hopeful. So I would highly recommend this book, In Limbo by Deb JJ Lee, out from First Second, and I'm definitely curious to see what Deb JJ Lee does next. Also, seeing the use of color on the cover makes me think, ooh, I'd really like to see something in color, but I can't imagine how long this must have taken. It's a tremendous piece of work. So really good, definitely recommend it. If you enjoy what we're doing here on the channel and want to support us, there's two ways to do that. The first is through Patreon. We have two different tiers of interaction there. The first one just gets you early access to the videos. Second tier gets you exclusive access to our Pranay Day ongoing web experiment, and also previews of the books that Sean and I are working on. And the money we get from that just helps us buy the books that we review. So turn that around into other creators' pockets, back into the community, and we really appreciate that. And if you want to support Living the Line itself, the best thing to do is to support what Sean's doing with Living the Line Publishing. So we'll go ahead and take a look at one of his projects now. The Exile by Eric Creek is a gorgeously illustrated Viking saga of revenge. Eric Creek calls it his Viking Western. It's about a guy who's been away on the warpath and is returning home to some family troubles that have to be resolved. And this is told in just this amazing, like, kind of 3-color art style that looks like old woodblock cuts or something. It's absolutely gorgeous book that you've got to pick up. Thanks for following along. Take it away, Jack.
Lucy